G'day punters, welcome back to the Punters Academy, episode 4 for 2022. Good morning, John Walter from racingwatch.com.au.
Good morning, mate. Yeah, no, I even looked it up. I've even got episode 4 on there. I'm ahead of the game today.
Excellent. Well, plenty to talk about this week, John. Rosehill Saturday, a couple of trials this morning, which we're going to briefly touch on first, and then we've got our questions and question of the week. The show's obviously brought to you by Topsport.com.au. So if you don't have an account with Topsport, you're mad if you don't. They're one of the fairest, if not the fairest, corporates out there. So let's start off, John, just looking at these trials this morning. There's plenty of talk on Twitter about it. The 2-year-old Grease from the Mar and Eustace stable was seemingly impressive in its trial. I think we're just going to bring that up now. That's it there, jumping in front and being restrained in the Coolmore colours. And then I think it settles outside leader and then ranges up and races away from them, puts about 3 and a bit links on them late, and really strong through the line.
Yeah, a lot of good attributes. Obviously, first start, it didn't run time, but showed speed, wasn't asked to do a lot. This time, jumps with power again, and love to see that early speed. Love to see how well this horse settles after being restrained. And then what it does in the straights, obviously, really impressive as well. Hard to see or ask for a 2-year-old to do any more than what you see here for mine.
Interesting about the times this morning, John. The official times have this heat going 61.19 versus the heat 1, which was Alligator's Blood trial of 61.5. So they've got it going faster. Running home the last 600, 34.84 according to the official times, and 34.13 in the Alligator Blood trial. Alligator Blood was pushed out, won by about 7. I can tell you now, just having a quick look at these times and clocking them on a provisional basis, the official times are way out. Be careful here. On both heats. I'm not going to state just by how much, but I can tell you it's enormous, the gap. So whilst impressive in style and looks, certainly didn't trial as well as it appears on official results.
Well, yeah, and it's up to you.
But still decent all the same.
That's right, and a really good comparison in an open class sprinter that was pushed out by a stable that's shown speed and hammered to the line, whereas this thing really I just love visually what it does. Not so much to this point, even though it's put a gap on him. It's this part here where it changes leg and really lets go through the line. He's pricked. I like understanding the clock, and I'm obviously aware of it that it's out. I still think this is a pretty nice horse that could be very dangerous in size, Percy Sykes, those sorts of races. So interesting, but yeah, like that. It's just another example of being very careful of any information that you're getting hold of and wanting to know that it's as accurate as possible.
John, it's going into the Riesling, I think you suggested?
Yeah, I think, the Riesling first up is the plan at this stage from what I've been told. It's a half to loving Gabby too, which I'm not a big breeding person, but obviously she was a really talented 2-year-old that got out to a mile, so it can't hurt. And, she's obviously been held back a little bit, whether for whatever reason, and she's going to be let go at the right time in what looks a pretty lean 2-year-old year so far.
Yes. I'm just having a quick look at some numbers here. If you look at the Mar Eustace, now what period is this over? I'll just double check this. Let's make a quick change there. Had it on 6 months. I'm just looking at the last 2 years of results from this stable and breaking them down by age. They've performed very well with their 2-year-olds comparatively. Certainly in the last 6 months or so, their 2-year-olds have been on fire in terms of the betting results that you can achieve as a punter. But interesting to see what happens there. And as you say, definitely a late starter. But look, I think we saw the latest was Bint Masque. I read on Twitter recently in terms of it being produced towards a slipper. So if we have seen the winner as a slipper, it's going to be a fairly ordinary rating race, I would suggest, but based on what's been raced so far. But we'll get into that. So Rosehill Saturday, John, the track sort of on the shoot races, as you'd expect, played a bit quicker, 3.7. That's races 2, 5 and 6, and the non-shoot races are 4.1, so a dead track and that's races 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. Look, the inside for mine was no good. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah. The early report was pretty nasty, as in heavy towards the inside was the guesstimate at a reading there, and then 7 off was the best walking lane, and then sort of 5 plus was the next best. So no surprise to see it race the way it did, but it definitely looked like significant considering the little amount of water that went on during the week allegedly, and the little amount of rain they received. The inside's always a little bit dusty there at Rosehill, unless it's a rock hard track, but certainly looked far more significant than usual for that setup.
Well, I think I commented on Twitter that all the rain fell in lanes 1 to 4.
Isolated showers.
Isolated showers. That was a good comment from you, John. Okay, race 1, the highway, the 1400 highway. Race 1, they've gone out 4.2 lengths fast to the 800 and 2.2 fast to the 600. So we've got a solid to above average tempo by the time they got to the 600 point. So they had to slow down a bit, but certainly put it on. The last sectional was very slow, minus 7.1 lengths from the 800, minus 5.3 from the 600. So anything making ground was flattered. John, what do you want to say?
I think it's an absolutely putrid race that we're probably best to forget about as soon as we can. There's a few horses that'll probably end up in country championship qualifiers that may have been just having a look. I think maybe Markowitz is probably the one that fits into that, but it does scare me that the horse was certainly flattered tempo-wise, whatever it did. But I just feel like that they maybe thought it was a bit of a detriment to win this race going forward to the country championships, the way it was ridden here and the intent shown compared to last start when they were really desperate to get it to the outside as soon as possible and let it rip. They sort of just was poked up in between them here, but it's probably the only horse that I had any real interest in going forward. Dakshar and that stable, Lyle Chandler, are going well. It's the grey who's tracking up 3 wide and sort of presents and then gets chopped out late. But I think the winner's just a hard fit, honest horse that's going really well and was really well placed. And this is a bit of a merry-go-round race. They're all pretty one-paced. You can see behind, all suited by fast tempo, except for those up on speed, and none of them do a lot. So I just think it's a pretty ordinary race.
One of the questions we got, John, this week, and I'm sort of bouncing around a bit here, but I thought it relevant to just mention it, was that we were asked by Kramer whether or not there was any chance we could say what we both backed in the race and what price we marked the winner in the first few in the market. Look, we might get to that next time out. John and I will have a chat about it.
I've got a segment that I haven't even told you about just for that question. I wanted to give you the pineapple of the week, the John Walter right up the pineapple of the week for that. That was just, I thought, I don't really want to go through every bet that I have, that's for sure, but I'm happy to show you my bad beacon of the week or something like that for interest. I definitely don't think it's worthwhile you and I telling everyone every bet we've ever had in our lives. I don't think it really helps anyone.
No, I don't know if it does, but I mean, we can maybe talk about some of the horses.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
If there's a horse that they're particularly interested in, or a set of horses they're particularly interested, we could talk about a small group. But to go through every race and cover all the main chances, what we rated them, what we backed, I don't think that's something that we...
Bit of overkill, yeah. I'm happy to say, like, if I had an opinion that was right or wrong, especially when you're wrong for whatever reason, because it usually leads to, helping you going forward. So I'm good with that, but I don't think reading out my $58 free bet on something is really going to help anyone.
Fair enough. Okay, so thanks for the question, Kramer, but we'll take it on notice, and if you've got runners that you're particularly interested in, let us know and we'll certainly talk about those. So back to the race, John. Look, Dan Zadell ran the best last 200 of the race, which was 11th best on the day, but I think was flattered because of the tempo. Caught the check at around the 400. Royal Exit bled, so it's out for 3 months. What else have we got here? I think we've got a couple of other notations.
I did see Royal Exit bled,
Step Lee over-raced Shen Gui, or Shen Ju, however you want to pronounce it. It's gone for a spell. Surf Sonic got held up between the 400 and the 300. And Foodie King, I think we call it.
Went okay first up. Restricted room can improve, I thought. But it's just such a horrible race. I didn't want to be too forgiving of too much out of it. But Step Lee's probably the one horse worth talking about because it was probably close enough to Country Championship final favourite at one point, and it just looks like it's looking for hurdles. It's going really ordinary.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can probably move on from this race, John.
Yeah.
Race 2, the 1100 benchmark 94. They've gone out 3 lengths slow to the 800 and 2.5 slow to the 600. So we've got a slow tempo early for the first 300 metres, and then they had gone or sped up a little bit, but still below average by the time they got to the 600. So obviously this suited the horses in front. Rule of Law has now won 5 on the trot, which is a rare feat, certainly in the Sydney or metro area. Mr. Mosaic laid back towards the inside. Fair bit of criticism, I suppose, of Reece Jones on face value, but the horse just tends to do that. Certainly for Give It, it was a bit easy though, 11-4 out to 7-2. Shadow Crush was disappointing, I thought. Jockey said track condition was to blame. I think not.
It looked like the betting knew before the race it was not going to be showing up.
Yeah, interesting that Tim Clark there on the winner steered right out to what he obviously knew was the best part of the track, and that showed good initiative there. Never Talk made ground late. It was 11-1 into 7-1, had the best race sectionals in the race itself, and made some ground. Was obviously suited by the soft conditions. Look, the favourite just keeps winning. What do we say?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good ride again. This horse has been the recipient of really good rides in all of its races for mine, pretty much. I think it was dominant early with a bit of an ordinary steer at Warwick Farm or something. But I thought Tim's just ridden it. Really, I don't think he's identified the winner as probably a horse that's an 1,100 metre maximum horse. So he doesn't want to leave it completely alone, but thinks if he gets to it early enough, should be stronger than it. And he's more worried about the horses behind him. So he's sort of given it enough of a loose lead to control the tempo, but then, got into the race nice and early, got to the better part of the track. And, yeah, I don't think Shadow Crush would have had to put up some sort of performance, considering he basically wins the race between the 8 and the 200, and it's all over by here. They've both run okay, the second and third horses, I thought, but just love the way this horse is, good speed, can quicken off it. He can sit outside the leader. He's strong. And, 1,100 metres, I think there's a group. What is it? It's not a Morris McCart. Maybe it's a Morris McCart in 2 or 3 weeks for him. And it looks an ideal race where he'll probably get down in the weights in early season. 1,100 metre listed race looks ideal for him, probably. Around
Fair
that
enough.
course distance. Yeah.
Horse is just flying. Puts itself into the race, makes its own luck. Race 3, the 1,572 race, which was a midway. They've gone out 6.1 lengths slow to the 800 and 8 lengths slow to the 600. So the tempo per furlong's pretty much identical, below average to slow pace throughout the race. And it sort of made it easy for the winner in hindsight, which was pretty easy in the betting too.
It did open up short, but yeah.
6-4 out to 3-1. Look, that was one that I had something on late because it sort of got out silly odds, I thought, but nothing to write home about.
Well, French two horses with any quality in the race, and one obviously had a change of tactics, which I wanted to talk about, just what they do at the start. And I know that they've said it's going for a spell, so maybe it wasn't spot on either, but I thought this ride was basically inexplicable and pretty embarrassing, and left Military. Obviously, a horrible race. Military has been handed the race, has done nothing. It's won by a good margin, and whatever happened at the start here, it was just like this French Emperor, which I think was the only other quality horse in the race. They say to be ridden further back, but look. He could have easily slot in midfield, no problem, and he just aggressively drags this horse. It's like he's got the shits, like he's just been told, I'm not going to take part today. Like he's forcibly taking this horse back to the rear of the field in a really slow run race where he could have been midfield for the same, and he just sits out wide and just restrains the whole horse the whole way around, expending energy for no reason. Like that sort of ride to me is the ride that has to be explained because he's forcibly taking the horse out of the race.
Well, it was 6-4 out to 4-1, and nearly $5.83 3 on BSP. So
you can still see here he's still fighting the horse to restrain it back behind them. When he's 12 off the lead in a race that's going, what is it, like 8 lengths below standard to the 800 metre mark or whatever it is, or the 600, is it? It's just
well, eight lengths to the 600, 6.1 to the 800. But when you break that down per furlong, that's virtually identical.
And as soon as the sprint goes on, he decides, oh well, now I'll have a try. Yeah, that doesn't really it's just that ride there is just horrendous. Like, it doesn't get worse for mine, and it's a terrible race that I don't even like. These midway races for me are just an absolute joke. They're lucky to be Wednesday races.
Either a brain snap or something else there, I'd say.
So the winner looks really impressive, but it's done nothing.
Yeah, that's right. It has done nothing. There was a bit of money for Free State, 14s and 10s. Ramus, 14s to 9s. Sally Pop, 20 to 12. Guru was slow out. Olympic Gaze ran the best last 200 in the race after it got held up a little bit, didn't it? Around about the 200 metre mark.
It was 100 days between runs, so it was a pipe opener. But yeah, it's really hard lining this form up. And I think just being sort of super critical of it, if it's going anywhere but a midway or back to Wednesday grade, if you're going midway to Saturday grade, I think it's very similar to highway to Saturday grade. You've got to be very harsh on that form.
Just an interesting horse in the race is Casino Mondial. Look, first up, they restrained this horse.
That was a terrible ride.
Well beaten. It got to the course and had some sort of injury or cut or something that had to be
abrasion or something.
Abrasion, yeah. And look, that's two sort of the only ordinary runs, I suppose. But once this horse steps up in trip, to around about that sort of 2,000 metre mark, it can race better. I mean, its ratings last preparation was certainly better than it's indicated in its 2 runs back. Matty Derrick booked there. Wait till it gets a senior jock on.
Interesting too, especially with horses like Buchanan's and that sort of horse. I would say that all wasn't right with this horse, no matter what, because it didn't show. Like, it should be leading these horses when they're going those sort of sections pretty comfortably, and it's not really showing any of its natural dash. Struggles to sort of get up 3 wide outside them at one point. I would say that's a complete forgive for a horse like Casino Mondial, because it hasn't shown its natural pace early in the race, which to me is usually a big warning sign that something's not right, whether it's fitness or an issue.
Anyway, upping distance, senior jock, maybe another run or two, but it should be able to race better than that at least. Race 4, we come to the Millie Fox, and those that tuned in on Thursday for our preview hopefully took advantage of that 380. There was plenty of it around the time we were filming the show. It started about 13:08 SP, went straight to the front as expected, and held off Bellucci Babe, who was surprisingly game late. It was well back too, 7-2 in the 3-1.
I think the really slow tempo, well, not really slow, but only average to slow tempo. Really, it's not
average tempo.
It's a hiding. It's a hiding of an even tempo, because they go slow and they continue to go slow. So,
was 0.3 slow. Sorry, only 0.3 fast to the 800 and 1.6 fast to the 600, which is average at best.
Average
and
at best.
Maybe the on-course punters here back Bellucci Babe. I can't see the teams coming for it, but mind you, it did have that one rating where it was beaten a length behind an expat that we mentioned the other day, and that was also Rosehill 1300, and that was a slow track. So perhaps they were.
It was the one horse I couldn't see how it could possibly beat expat, because it couldn't. It can't run the trip. I don't think they had. If they went hard, it was going to be like. I think it's completely. That's as close as it ever get to the expat. I thought it was insane odds at the end, the expat, and I think even looking at the race, nothing more could possibly have gone right for it. And you've had failures on top of that. Rocket Clock's gone like busted. Crone's only gone fair. Bring the Ransom got caught wide instead of getting forward, which just couldn't get there. Bellucci Baby, these horses, the first, I think it was had its birthday, the winner, but
Rocket Clock was worth talking about. 11-2 out of 13-2, but 10-1 Betfair starting price. So very easy.
And look at it. It it never really tacked on. Like it's gone terrible. It's nothing to do with the track. And then he's ridden it straight up the fence. If that's not a give up that the horse was, not all there, I don't know. Forget it went around. But I'm not sure. I'm not looking to back it next start, but I'd be forgetting it went around.
Lay Lude went okay. Ran the best sectionals in the race and did drift in the market, but, ran a fairly competitive race, didn't it, I think, to finish
super honest horse that just flies fresh. So probably aimed a little bit lower, but that's probably a good result for them getting, what was it, Group 3 black type? I don't know if it's got it before, but it's probably a good result from regardless.
Bit of a specking for Nicky's fling there, 20s to 16s off a reasonable run first up last prep, but on a much firmer track. Don't know what else we can say about the race, John.
No, well, Chrome's just not going as well as she was. The Rocket Clock, you just don't know what to do with it off that. Bringing the Ransom has to go back in grade. It's, they had a shot at the title there and it didn't come off. Bluchy Babe's going really well, but I'd want to see it back, 21 days, 28 days back to 1,000, 1,100. I think it could win. I'd love to see it down the straight in Melbourne or something like that. I just don't think it runs 1,300, but again, it's probably a good result. You can't knock the placement from the stable. That they're not punters. They're just trying to do the best for their owners, and they've got a Group 3 placing in a mare's race. It's a good result for them.
Indeed. Let's move on to race 5, the 1,100 metre 78. They've gone out 1.7 lengths fast to the 800, quickened right up to the 600, 6.5 fast. So they started off above average, and by the time they got to the 600, they were really travelling here, fast tempo. And what have we got to say here, John? Perfectly suited the winner in the second horse, didn't it? Where they were.
Well, it did, but they were still first up. So to really have a race put on in earnest from the 800 and to come out and be so dominant over the rest, you can't say that they've not. They've definitely had the perfect trails, but they were both vulnerable on paper fitness wise. A little bit surprising that Eyewitness was quicker away and. Strange ride. She just drives me insane, this Rachel King. Like, she could have given her horse a dig early and probably crossed the tertium. Instead, she grabs hold of it and then can't control it, and the rest is history. But
well, those two in front definitely use too much.
Carved each other absolutely, and it's just strange. She just does weird things and really affects races. She's a hard one to sort of work out when you're trying to map races what she's going to do. You can always probably expect it a little bit over aggressive, but sometimes she does this. But either way, yeah, they've had good runs. But you would have to say, like, Able Willie had a run under its belt and was a bit plain, not in the right spot compared to the other two, but still a bit plain, I thought.
Look, Marzu seems to have come back with a decent size new peak. As a gelding, so perhaps this horse is in for a much better preparation. Certainly can't knock the win first up.
I thought, I think you'd be more of the man to ask about it, but I think my theory is that the Snowden camp was really going only fair when this horse was last in work, and they've really picked up. So any horse that was going well during that period, you can probably expect them to at least reach whatever heights they did last up and probably exceed them. And over the last few weeks, it's been an absolute dream if you've been sort of running off that theory, whether it's correct or not. And this horse certainly looks like he's gone to another level, and absolutely no knock on the second horse, who'd only come off quiet trials, come up probably the little bit inferior ground and crushed the rest. And Fox Fighter ran well. It's hard to knock him too, but he definitely sort of had every possible chance, got to the right part, and no excuses at all for him.
Just regarding Snowden, you bang on there, John. August, September last year, they're running at around about £4 worse in rating than what they are currently. Wow. So I think that's a valid point that you make there for sure. And definitely stable.
And the other thing they seem to be able to do is whether they use jump outs a lot more than other stables. I always am concerned when they have one short course or one trial under 1,000 metres going to races like that, like a high pressure. I know it was only 1,100, but a high pressure race on paper, you tend to think that most of them are underdone, whereas the Snowdens definitely, I'm not scared. One short course trial for the 2-year-olds is enough for them, and one short course trial for the older horses resuming seems enough compared to other stables.
What do you say about Abel Willie? I mean, it was 9-4 into 7-4. I think it needs longer. It raced like it did. Probably wasn't helped by going back towards that inside section. But any comment about it, John?
Yeah, I'd marked it about $7 or something on Saturday, and I just didn't like where it was going to be in the run. I thought its first up run was good, but it was a run where he rode it incredibly well to get as close as he did to the winner, who I've got no opinion of. But obviously that winner had a Canterbury rail to help it. But going back through all its form, it had a comparable run against Marzu last prep, and as I said, there's no reason for Marzu to not have come on as much as Abel Willie had. And Abel Willie had issues in the run against Marzu, but he was completely dominant over him there. It was very hard for me to work out why he was so short. And I had a lot of really good judges wanting to be very bullish that it was basically a put-in-take-out job. He's a Group 1 horse on the way through. I just haven't seen it yet personally, and he definitely didn't show anything Saturday to back that up either. I couldn't find, it wasn't a great ride, but he never did anything really at any stage of the race.
Nowhere near Group 1 on what it's done in my numbers, the way I look at them. But in terms of, its position in the race, look, I marked it 11-4. So I did have it in there, but it was certainly not as short as the market. So I'm a bit surprised about the move. But, yeah, well, it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, he's got to prove himself, that's for sure, because there's no excuses there.
What about Minsk Moment? It was 6-1 in the market, John. It went ordinary.
It went only fair. It was surprisingly short as well. I just really didn't even have it in the race. But it's like you get them right, you get them wrong. And it looked like it was always going to have a bit of a negative position in the race, and it probably ran to as well as it could. I thought, like, it didn't do a lot. It was just outgraded. I think that's a very good race. Like I think at least the winner and the first two can definitely graduate through to better grade than whatever that was on Saturday. It was only a 78. They can definitely run in black type races competitively as quality 3-year-olds.
Well, provisional ratings for that horse we're just talking about in this moment, it did run the best the best 800 to 400 rating on the day. So that's interesting, despite being beaten 7. Perhaps it just wasn't ready, needed to run, and will improve. But it's got more ability. It's
completely unsportable race.
More ability than that, anyway.
I did make notes that they'd really jammed it in the trials and looked like it was, but I thought it was a bit one pace. So maybe just 1100 at Rosehill, just way too sharp for it, like you said.
So we're going to now talk about another 1100 metre race, the Silver Slipper. Here they've gone out 1 length fast to the 800, quickened right up to 4.5 fast by the time they got to the 600. So above average tempo early, solid tempo at the 600. The winner went on and found the fence and just kept going and towards the inside there, and on face value appeared like it was a decent sort of a win. My concern is the overall time was nothing flash, and particularly the last 400 minus 3.8 lengths and the last 200 minus 3.7 lengths against track and distance standards.
So it was all in the last 200, really, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Most of that was the last 200. The 400 to 200 was minus 0.3, minus 0.2, minus 0.3. So yeah, last 200 was weak. Look, it wasn't the worst ground, and you definitely got a bonus it for that. But I'm just querying the quality of this field. Magic, I think, which ran on seemingly well, who did run the best race sectionals, but nothing ranked above 35, which was the last 800 on the meeting, and it seemed to be flattered, I thought, and that's perhaps its run was a touch exaggerated. Queen of the Ball, who we originally selected on our preview show, and I sent out a note that I'm happy to pass prior to the race Saturday because it was going to map in what looked like a tricky spot. Surprisingly, very firm at 5-4. Don't know what to say about that, and I just think this race isn't much good.
Yeah, well, when I got that track report, I moved it right out, but I was still wrong about the race. I marked the winner 15-1. So I think the start's really important here, and for 2 reasons. It shows Magic's lack of tactical speed, and it shows what a strong win this horse was, in my opinion. Obviously concerned about that last section, but the amount of work this horse particularly did. To be honest, I actually didn't even watch it in the run. I just after what it had done in the first half of the race, I just was expecting it to drop out. So I didn't take it seriously at all watching it live, and then going back and watching it, I can't believe what it's done, to be honest. So it's the only horse for me out of this race. So it half misses the kick a little bit, as in doesn't Shanghai out like it did its first start. So number one, it's got a little bit more pressure on it. Magic here is ridden along. Like, it's not restrained out the back like these two horses. It's ridden along to try and hold a spot, and it's still sort of lost 5 or 6 lengths in the first 200 meters. That's a negative for me. Best of Bordeaux is up 3 wide carded there. Now it's, they're going quick here, and he's decided to put the pedal down, which is not easy to do for a 2-year-old.
That 8 to 600, John, was plus 3.2 lengths, so very quick.
And it's working there, right? So, yeah. And then it settles, as you said, so, and it's basically sustains that run to the 2 or through the 400 to the 200. So it's done a lot by this stage. And then, understandably, under pressure, the horse hangs back to the fence, which is obviously a no-go zone completely. And no horse, I don't think, on the day barely gets closer to the fence than this horse does. And Magic poking along behind. I'm not saying this horse is legless, Magic, and it's first starting a race, but for me, if I watch it close enough, and I've watched it a lot of times, watch it through the line here even, Best of Bordeaux they're not coming back to it. It's not stopping. It's still in the worst ground. Magic hasn't gone and run away from it like anything crazy through the line. I actually think the horse nearly responded, and he's not. I know the time's terrible for that last 200, but everything else in the race has done less work than him, and he's strong as possible. So, I've heard that. Look, the point you run 1200. I'd love to take him on next time over 1200.
The point you make, it did run the fourth best rating 2 to 200, meaning from the start of the race, the 1100, 2 to 200. So yeah, definitely used a fair bit of gas to get there, and for a 2-year-old to rate that highly in terms of those sections 2 to 6, 2 to 4, and 2 to 2 is on balance the impressive part of its performance, as you say.
Yes. And then obviously going back to the bias as well.
Yeah, I'm saying the race itself isn't much good, in terms of the other runners. The winner might be the exception. I've still got to get the final sectionals and everything to work out what I'm going to do with the race in terms of a rating. Yep. But it is a little bit concerning, that last 200. Its previous time against Queen of the Ball that day was significantly inferior. Queen of the Ball, they offered it up as an excuse, the track condition. Maybe not. I think it was
if that horse ran home in even time from the 200, I'd say the slipper's over. It went that good, comfortably, like it's over. So how much do you tack on to where it was in the track as opposed to the time and whatever? That's the magic assessment going forward. But I certainly wouldn't be scared of that horse over 1200.
No, I think it's a fair comment. Look, I keep coming back to the slipper. If we've seen the winner this year already race, then it's going to be a fairly low rating slipper to compare to recent events, or recent editions. But anyway, we'll wait and see. Let's get on to the Parramatta Cup, race 7. Race 7, the 1900 Parramatta Cup, they've gone 0.6 slow, time honoured, 0.6 slow to the 800, 2.6 slow to the 600, which works out to be an average tempo.
I'm not even going to show the first half of this race because nothing happens.
Correct. Look, on Tont was 13 to 2 out to 8 to 1, easy first up. Started 10 to 1 BSP. Mustajir pulled up lame, 2 out of 5, so forget it. Mighty Bill 9 to 4 to 5 to 2, absolutely pissed in, easy win. No compromise. We're in the best sections of the meeting after being held up. And
can we talk about? Can we just talk about this only? I get it. And it's pissed.
Ride.
No, just okay. These are the two horses back here. So this is no compromise last with the white cap. This is Mighty Beale outside it, and obviously Mighty Beale's got a much better setup fitness wise. But let's just watch what the two riders do from this point, and please explain to me why.
Sorry, what are you saying,
Mighty Beale? No compromise.
Mighty Build's midfield, right?
Oh, sorry, I got the wrong horses.
Yes.
Yes, okay, sorry. Mighty Build's this one. Similar colours. I just wanted to... The difference between these two rides is what I couldn't understand from the same stable. One takes off, so that must be Mutabares or whatever it's called. Mubares. I just can't understand the ride on this Never Compromise, and the never having any sort of idea to want to go towards the outside at any stage really scares me.
Well, I thought that he was going to there, and then he gets held up, and then he has to go back inside. So you can see him back up on the hills there. Now what's he going to do? He's going to try and get out there, and then he goes, no go here. Start back to the inside.
We'll go back toward the inside. You don't see many stayers stepping through fields like Fred Fittler and accelerating at the same time. I'm not saying it would have beaten the winner, but what the hell was he doing?
Yeah, look, it wasn't the best decision, I must say. I will say about the winner, who did look a short price coming up to the 300 there in the run. Its chances were helped greatly by a big slowdown between the 800 and the 400 on the lead up, Too Much to Bear, who slowed down 4.7 lengths between the 800 to 400. So it made the opportunity for those horses to make cheap ground during that section a lot easier. Not taking anything away from the winning performance, but Too Much to Bear didn't do its chances much good either by trying that tactic. So a bit surprised that
everyone knows that this horse is he's got a really strong ability to relax wherever he gets in the run, and he's got a really solid sort of 400 to 600 metre turn of foot on him. There's no doubt about that, this horse, and this is his, I would say, going through his form, sort of 1,900, 2,000 metres is his ideal distance that he can really show that off. I know he's 1/24, but I would say this is his bread and butter.
Well, I mean, Mighty Bill's run first up was actually good. I mean, it ran, I don't know if we actually talked about the sectional ratings.
I think it did, and I think we sort of said that it was a perfect tune-up to go back up in distance.
Yeah, best last 800, best last 600, best last 400, and second best last 200 ratings on the meeting. That's obviously adjusted for distance, as it should be. And look, yeah, it had no hope first up, and it was a good run under the conditions. And all it's done is go to sort of its expected level, and it was well found in the market.
I thought Odd Tonk went okay, but he was obviously, as the betting suggested, just a little bit vulnerable first up. And, you know, for a horse, he got past those leaders, put a bit of a length on them, and just completely ran out of gas. His run was fine, and obviously this horse, I'm not even the stable, whatever, but this horse has run the race perfectly for this horse. It doesn't look like many others were well set up, and everything fell in this horse's lap this day. But he is a good horse, and as I said, he's very consistent. He'll do this again. So he's a horse you can follow with confidence, and I think Never Compromise is a really talented horse. He can pick up a nice race.
Yeah, and up in distance too for No Compromise, even up to the 1.5 miles. It's shown that it can do that without any issue at all. So
love the way he attacks the line after all of that interference, which, you know, momentum in staying races is really key to, you know, being able to hold up all your energy and use it in one go. And these horses very rarely can be stood on their head a few times and continue to run through the line. So they're a really good sign for that horse.
It has shown a liking for these conditions, though, hasn't it? These dead to slow conditions. So,
but that's how most tracks are prepared now as well, aren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're all prepared as a 4 or a 5, aren't they? That's what they try to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to race 8, the Hobartville. Minus 0.1 to the 800 and minus 0.3 to the 600. So bang on average tempo. Animo sort of was able to settle closer, which thank God was enough to get hit at home.
So the only surprise, you and your dirty bag, I'm going to be into you people taking $1.70 this horse. The only surprise at the start for me was that Maurice, my dad, got poleaxed and it gets checked by whatever that horse is, and ends up out the back. So instead of it probably being the up in front and chasing Silent Impact, it ends up out the back.
Yeah, so it wasn't able to do what it was going to do or what it was expected to do. Converge ran really well for a horse that's going to be suited up in distance. It ran the second best last 800 fourth best last 600, third best last 400, and
knocked
seventh
up.
best last 200 rating. Knocked up too, so it needed to run, but will be better up in trip. Halal has returned very well, and I'm just glad that it wasn't too well. Ranch Hand, look, it copped a little bit of a check late when Animo sort of came in.
See him pulling here. I'm sure this horse is a 1200 metre maximum horse. He just not. The others are all relaxed and travelling, and he's still keen, and he's in a good spot. And they're not going super slow. I just think this horse wants a better tempo, but that's just my personal preference.
Well, interesting. Its best form is over 11 and 1200 metres in terms of its rating. So you might be right there, John. So on Impact, which the money came for in the early markets, suggested that it was going to lead, and it did, but wasn't able to go on with it. What else do you want to say about the race?
No, I think you've nailed most of it. I think this horse, 8-2, huge again, completely on target for its race, which is the Randwick Guineas over a mile. Halal the same. He's certainly been forced back to that inside section and run really well. Everyone's collecting that was on Animo, but I thought it was an incredible ride. He did say that he thought the horse lifted again when it needed to when Halal came at him, but I don't think he's the dominant horse that everyone suggests he may be, like his price suggested. You reverse that run that he had with Halal. I think he beats him, and I don't know about Converge. I think he's still probably a run short. I did like the run of Maurice Midad again. I don't know whether he'll get these horses over a mile, but once they get to 2,000, he might give them something to think about. He really doesn't get balanced up until really late, and then starts to surge once he gets off the heels of this runner, I thought, and through the line, he's good. So I think he probably wants 2,000, but they all line up again in the Rosehill Guineas, and I don't think there'll be much between them again. And it'll probably come up very short again, Animo.
Well, yeah. I mean, do you think that the track condition had any effect on Animo?
I don't think so, considering I think it came down the absolute best lanes. I don't know how anyone could make. What do you think he needs a firmer track or?
Well, I know it. Look, the Cox Plate was a genuine dead track, and unfortunately, it didn't get the protest that day. Another nightmare, and it did win on a dead track first up at Kembla at the beginning of its last campaign, and it did win impressively on a dead track there at Rosehill in the Sire's Produce, I think it was. I just wonder whether its acceleration can be better seen on a drier surface. That's the only question.
He definitely didn't show it there, did he? I would have thought the ride that he had, the stage of everyone's preparation, he's still probably half a run short, like all of them. But I expected him to be more dynamic, absolutely, and put them away, which he didn't do. So, bit
of a query.
Yeah, and I think all of them have got upside, so it's very difficult to add too much onto him. And I think, I think Converge is going to give him a race for his money. I think Halal will give him a race for his money up for a mile. It's another race that's a sort of a mouth-watering race. You've got a couple of horses down south that may show up as well. I don't know if they'll measure up, but it's going to be a good race.
Okay, let's move on to race 9, the benchmark 100 metre race. They've gone out 5.2 lengths fast to the 800, 5.7 fast to the 600. Solid tempo here. Definitely aided the winner, who returned this preparation and showed a good
turn.
Is
this the time where we talk about me getting 5-1 in a maiden at Scone and getting it beat, trying to buy it 10 times, then backing it to win? Was at the Rosehill Guineas for about 3 months, and it get beating ahead by bloody Moamu or whatever his name is, and then this horse has been a nightmare for me. But everything in his favour on Saturday.
Why don't you tell us about it, John?
I'll tell you all about it. So they're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. Yeah, how fast did you say?
The solid tempo. So 5.2 fast to the 800, 5.7 to the 600. So break it down by furlongs, and we get a solid tempo for sure here.
A really solid tempo, which is just ideal for this horse. I think that the other sort of main factor is that a horse like Dream Circle, whilst forced back towards the inside section here, he only runs 1,400 an inch, whereas Skylab's only getting warmed up at 1,400. He certainly gets out to maybe not the best ground. Like you can't argue really. I don't. He's sort of maybe 15 off the fence. I'm not really sure looking at that, but not many horses ran on out there, but not many horses got out there. So hard to know what part of the best part of the track Skylab was in, but he's certainly the only horse with 2,000 metre plus form in this race, and he was suited by the tempo, whereas the others are probably looking for somewhere to lie down. But he's and I think he knocked up there. He's in for a good prep, the winner, even though he had the tempo in his favour. He had a big weight to carry first up, and the time overall was pretty solid. So I can't knock the winner in any way, shape or form. He's the only horse that I could be with going forward into its prep with any confidence.
Say Rep was well supported, 10-1 and the 6-1 first up at the 1400, a distance well short of its best.
I heard an interesting comment of it when he went out. They said that they sent Pike back into the room to get his spurs, which is interesting, just because obviously a bit of intent. They probably expected the horse to run well, and he obviously needs a bit of urging to get going. So it was just an interesting comment that I heard Duffy, and he's the only one capable of picking up that sort of thing on Sky Channel, and he made comment of that before the race, which I thought was interesting. And it did run well, but hard to compare it with the winner. I thought the winner's just better, and any sort of view is just one pace, does need a bit further probably. The rest, as you see, like they all bash into each other after the line. They're all take-turn horses, I like to call them, that need perfect setups and perfect races and perfect maps to get home. It nearly was the case for Dream Circle, but he's just not strong enough to run that strong 1400.
Giannis was very disappointing. I thought it was hard in the market. They're saying the track conditions were an excuse for it. I thought it was disappointing. It's one on dead ground before.
Perfect run in the race. He finally jumped out of the gates and did everything right in the run, and I thought he was horrible as well.
What else is there to say? Invinciano just needs a really firm track to show its best. New arrangement.
And he needs to dominate too, I think. He doesn't like a race where there's competition for the front.
I agree with that. New arrangement might be a forgive. Not
is that
sure.
it here?
That's it. Back on the fence.
Yeah. Is this deal? One of them is deal maker, one of them is new arrangement. I'm not sure.
Yeah. New arrangement's back on the fence. Number 6.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Definitely. Then
fence, I should say. Yeah. Forgive it. I think we can move on to race 10.
Sounds good.
So we've got the 1478 here. They've gone out 2.2 lengths fast to the 800 and 1.7 fast to the 600. So pretty much above average tempo to begin with for the first 600, and then they've probably averaged by the time they got to the 600 home. War Eternal, 13-2 in the 4-1, ran the best race sectionals to win this. Cross-check, might have raced a little bit too close. Impasse, slow recovery. Still Diamond was disappointing after being back from 15-2 into 5-1.
Couldn't work it out. Couldn't work out the betting. I understand the scratching, but I couldn't work out the betting for. It was the one horse I couldn't work out how it could possibly win the race. Steel Diamond.
Yeah, maybe. Not sure about it now. It's been racing well, and that was a bit ordinary. But maybe, what is it? Does it need to be tipped up last preparation? Did get held up a little bit in the race, but still rated well down. So not sure about it. Daj ran 11-8 into 4-6 on debut when it won, and started a short price favourite again Saturday, 11-8 to 10-9. Died on its run the last 100 metres for sure.
Had to be the one to beat the way the map was running. It did run well first up with weight and everything, but obviously a big question mark going up from an ordinary Wednesday race to a Saturday race for it to be so heavily backed as it was. And I thought it was still disappointing. I thought the Waterhouse horses in general have been a little bit soft late in their races compared to normal, say, the last 10 days or so. So I do tend to keep a close eye on their horses and how they're sort of all finishing. It tends to line up. So I don't know why, but this winner's last 200, both of its runs back have been pretty good for mine. And another horse, that he doesn't do things quickly, but again, watching right on the line, he's starting to really drag the jockey nearly through the line, and I love to see that. I'm very concerned over the level of the form, but he does have definite upside, this winner.
Well, just on Waterhouse Bot, last 30 days, 56 runners, 11 winners, 19.6% strike rate. Nothing wrong with that, but minus 25% almost at SP. last 60 days about -19.
Have you got anything shorter? 14 days or something?
Look, I could run 14
No,
days.
yeah,
But
it's only. I know they had a really good run about two or 3 weeks ago, and then it just seems like they've been found wanting a bit. I know they had a win at Gosford, which is $1.30 or something on Saturday, but everything else has really been doing this. Just under pressure, they don't normally stop like that. That horse really stopped.
Well, the lady trainer and her chief confidant are overseas at the moment, so read into that whatever you
St.
will.
Moritz. Why wouldn't you be?
Read into that what you will.
Do you think they'd be staying in an Airbnb?
I don't think so. Somehow.
I do think that I heard rumours he's going either to the Randwick Guineas or the Australian Guineas. I'm not saying he's immoral, but I think he'll run better than they think, than the market will pick up. I think that horse is not a bad horse.
So, John, horses to follow. Look, stating the obvious rule of law is flying, but outside it, I'm going to say Marzu, who I think has come back extraordinarily well and as a better horse, as a gelding, and Mighty Bill's racing really well, no compromise. I think that as it steps up in distance, it'll race really well and continue to be very competitive, and they're probably the main ones for me. Converge as it gets up in trip too. Maybe not next start.
Rule of law, absolutely agree. The Midway can go straight in the bin. X-Pac can go straight in the bin. I agree. Marzu and Zapateo, I think, can both be followed, and with confidence out of that race. And even Fox Fighter, if he drops back a level or stays in that grade, because I think he'd be unlucky to run into a Marzu or Zapateo in a race like that. Best of Bordeaux for me is got a bit of freakish quality about that win for mine, and it can certainly measure up. If the slipper was next week, I'd rather back it than Coolangatta. The Parramatta Cup, I agree with you. Those two horses are just carbon copy. Whatever gets the right run in the race, I don't think there's much between Mighty Bill and No Compromise, and I think the margin sort of hid the closeness they have in ability levels. I'd nearly actually say No Compromise is possibly a better horse, especially 2,000 plus. I think Converge is the one to beat in the Randwick Guineas. I think that's his target race, and I expect, as I said, those stable to be back up and flying by then. Maurice is my dad, a Derby horse. No knock on Halal or Animo, both going okay. Pretty good meeting. And then, Skylab, he's a tough horse to place, but he might end up in a Doncaster or something with 51 or something. I don't know where he'll end up, but he's an interesting horse, Skylab. He'll just keep running on if the tempo's on, and I think War Eternal's the only one to follow out of the last.
Fair enough. Let's move on to questions. But before we do, an issue that's got a lot of people talking this morning is the Betfair market-based rates have risen for some states, so up 16.
I'll interject. Before we talk about that interesting topic, you should talk about Topsport and how much better they are than, they don't take money off you when you back a winner. They
don't. And of course, when there's group racing running, the limits are bigger and they do apply from the open. So 5,000 early, 10,000 late if there's a group 2, 3 or 4, 10,000 to 25 if it's a group 1. And if it's a feature group 1 as determined by Topsport, 20,000 to 50,000. That's 20,000 early, 50,000 late. That's a good bet. And of course, the best of best products. Very competitive. If you don't have your account there, make sure you open one. Maybe drop Tristan a line if you don't have an account, or if you want to know a bit more. They do look after you, and they give you a fair bet.
The only people in the history, and that's much before, long before we ever had any sort of affiliation with them. Things like bonus bets or whatever, no problem. But they're the only people that maintain that. Not that that's why you have an account with most people, but still, every other place I know chops you off that. They still let you on exotics, whether it's quaddies, things like that. I don't know too many people they've limited in that arena either, which most people do. They certainly give a fairer go than anyone that I've ever encountered, and that, as I said, is long before our affiliation came along with them. So I agree that they're an account worth having, especially if you're someone who struggles to get on consistently.
Indeed, for sure. Okay, so Betfair announced this morning that their market-based rates were going to rise in some of the states. So all bar New South Wales and South Australia remain the same, as does international. New Zealand is actually down 16.66%. If you're betting in New Zealand, I don't imagine the liquidity would be much there. But they're up 16.66% if you're betting in those other states from March the 1st. They've also abandoned the Betfair points regime, and they're going to move to a tiered discount rate system for the VIP program. So make sure you contact your VIP account manager if you want to know more about that. John, look, this is another tax on punters, but you can't blame them considering the costs for race fields and other parts of that legislation. It just keeps rising.
Well, and an exchange is such an important part of the whole system for mine. They don't understand the turnover that it drives. They don't understand the money that comes back through off course. They don't understand the money that moves all around the system, around and around and around because of Betfair, and it wouldn't be there without it. And I've always argued that the industry itself should run its own exchange. They would have. I know they do have full transparency with Betfair now. They can basically tap into anyone's account and see what they're up to if there's an integrity issue. But why not be in control of your own market and then be able to reduce rates to what a not-for-profit should, rather than Betfair, who are trying to provide a product and having to tax everybody to. I think they lose in New South Wales on what they provide. So. It's a bit of a nightmare for everyone, and the tax is the issue. So why not either work it out between you to make it realistic or not? But to me, how does sooner or later turnover has to dive?
Well, look, I don't understand what the officials in racing are doing. We've talked about this ad nauseum. Rob Waterhouse came up with what I thought was a great idea about the tote. And that is that you put a 20% takeout on the tote off course, and you have a separate dividend on course where you reduce it to zero. That would get people back to the track in droves. It would certainly stimulate betting into the pools, make it far more attractive, make the bookmakers more competitive, get, as I said, crowds up, not just the drinking crowd. And that would be one initiative that could really reinvigorate betting.
Exotics back from the corporates, making them put theirs back to the tote and giving them a commission or something. There's plenty of easy changes that could invigorate the tote. They seem to be wanting to strangle it, the same as Betfair. I don't understand.
Well, I don't understand either. Richie Irvine's come up with some really good ideas over the time as well. So when they're going to start listening, I don't know. I think the problem is that, and this might be a simplistic way of describing it, but back in the day when I was younger and going to the track, the committeemen and the people in charge of racing were made up of punters, big owners, big punters, people like Jack Ingham and so on and so forth. Nowadays, they're executives that are coming out of often industries that aren't necessarily racing centric, and the whole agenda seems to have shifted.
They're more worried about the flowers looking pretty out the front than they are the betting ring or anything concerning. Yeah.
Well, they're certainly more interested in the party goers and the prize money and the stakeholders in prize money. But, racing's only customers are punters.
And today we've got a meeting at Bathurst where there's 21 mils of rain and the meeting's off. So we spent $2 million on a big dance last week, but we've got tracks that can't cop 20 mils of rain and it becomes a abandoned meeting. So we're losing meetings for 20 mils of rain. We've got angles that, you need to be cross-eyed to try and work out who's won races, and but we're spending
timing. Forget grandstands, put it into the tracks. In terms of the timing systems and also the irrigation and the drainage on a lot of these courses, so that we don't lose these meetings. And it's a common theme. We're seeing it all the time. I'm getting notices from Racing Australia, every day virtually, about meetings that we lose because of a certain part of the track is deemed unsafe for racing. Or, as you say, we've had 20 odd mil of rain and next thing you know, the meeting's off. So it's not good enough and something's got to happen. So moving into questions. Okay, first one here is, was the apparent early mid-race slowdown on Eduardo by Nash as bad as it looked live? Well, look, I'm going to say no. And to back that up, just got to quote a few numbers here. The leader to the 800 went 1.9 fast. To the 600 went, what do we got here? Sorry, the 8 to 6 was 2.1 fast. The 8 to 4 was 1.3 fast. The first 200 metres plus 1.9. The first 400 plus 2.1 per furlong. So there was no real slowdown to speak of in that context. So if you believe there was, it was probably just optical. And I'm going to say I don't think it brought Eduardo one done.
The winners. If Eduardo was disadvantaged, why wasn't the winner disadvantaged?
Yeah, I mean, there's been lots of talk about, whether Nature Strip would have won had it not copped that little squeeze up early and being a bit tardy out of the gates. It may well have. There's a good argument.
Yes, but...
You'd say yes, but there's also the issue of home affairs, having to be in front of it. And I think Nature Strip, you could argue it had its chance too, because once it recovered quickly, it was on the back of there against home affairs. So Eduardo, just didn't come up, I don't think, as well as it did last prep. Nature Strip is, I think, on a provisional basis, rated about the same. Mars Crusader, Profiteer, or what a joke yet. I think it was into $8, was it, in early betting?
Well,
and our man Jason put up 7 to 4 or the place or whatever it was. I think I said I had it 500 to 1. It did start $55 or so on the bet there, and it probably
really well.
It outperformed. Really
bad placement of a horse. When I would be sicker if I owned it watching how well it ran than I would be if it got beaten 100 metres, because they've missed an opportunity for mine where it could have been better placed and really run well, because it's just it ran better than I thought it would.
Haven't reviewed Flemington as a meeting, so I don't know if there's something in the stewards report or some reason here, but Guitra, as I suspected, continued to not race well. So not sure what the go is there, but I
wouldn't be surprised if that was the last time we saw that horse.
Well, who knows? I mean, there might be something there that I haven't seen yet. You could probably forgive it, but I don't know. So that's the answer to that question. Look, Les has sent in 2 questions this week, I think. Yeah, he has. I'll read the first one out. How do you factor in racing incidents into your ratings? And also, do you get the exact distances covered by each horse in a race? What would the ratings difference be between 2 horses over 2,000 metres, one 3 back the fence and the other one 3 wide, no cover? So there's a sort of a multi-tiered question. As far as race incidents go, or what I would call just in-running adjustments, unless you can do it for all runners in every race, then I'd probably say don't bother. Unless you're just interested in one jurisdiction and you're able to cover that jurisdiction. It is a lot of work. Fortunately, I don't do the work. It's done by a computer, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes into that in terms of data points and so forth. So I do it, but I don't probably do it as well as I would like to do it in that sense, as it is done on an automated basis. The exact distances, look, they're inaccurate. The Racing New South Wales, Punters, Intel, Racing.com, those extra distances covered by horses are a furphy. Often they're wrong. You've only got to look at some of the straight races and some of the numbers they're quoting. It would suggest a lot of zigging and zagging would need to occur for those distances to be right. So they're just not right. The distance or difference between 2,000 metre, 3 wide, no cover, 3 back the fence. Look, assuming on it depends on track, it depends on pace, it depends on if there's any lane bias, but assuming a perfectly even track and assuming a large track, and I just took some numbers this morning, between 8.5, 9 pounds, between 8 and 9 pounds, I'd say the difference between 3 wide, no cover and the fence. But there's a lot of assumptions there, and it will vary track to track, and it will vary depending on how they run the race.
It's a big difference anyway.
Yeah, it's a big difference. It's a big difference if the inside's fair.
In a perfect world. Yeah.
In a perfect world, assuming a fair track, it's a big difference, and it makes a big difference to your pricing and the way in which you adjust them next time. And that is one of the things that we do when it comes to calculating in run. is the wides. Okay, so the second question, or the second separate question from Les, was what was the main reason you both decided on your area of expertise, Sydney Provincial, compared to other states? John, I'm going to let you go and have the first shot at this.
I grew up there. Simple as that. I grew up there. I went to the races every day for 5 years. I had a couple of sick golfing friends that were part of the industry in their own way, and they took me out there, and I got to know jockeys and trainers, not personally, but just, that was all I did. I went to the races every day for maybe 5 years. Country, provincial, I drove everywhere and got to know them all, and got to know the area, got to know the tracks, got to know everything inside and out, and I sort of stuck. And you've got to keep trying to update that. It's more difficult from afar, but I just got to know the area really well, and that's why I've stuck to the New South Wales in particular, and me more from Sydney to Coffs Harbour and in between, somewhere in between. That's the area that I stick to.
Well, my betting isn't centralised just to New South Wales, but I do turn over more money in New South Wales than other regions, for sure. Very similar reasons to John, having grown up and had my first experience of racetrack attendance in Sydney, and used to go to the races there, and got into the member side early and met a few smart people, and certainly got a lot of help there. So, look, I think it's just horses for courses. There's no right or wrong. It's just what you prefer. I think that there's a fairly strong argument to consider doing your local jurisdiction, whatever that may be, and trying to specialise in that if you're one person.
It's weird, and some people, because we get people in the chat room and things, and it's weird when you find out where they're from, because you get people that specialise in WA. Very few of them are in WA. Then you get guys who love Melbourne racing because they love analysing jump outs and things that are very difficult to analyse compared to a place that's smaller and all the information's on tap for everyone to get hold of, and they think they've got an advantage that way. Then you find the people who hate Melbourne for that reason. So there's positives and negatives to every jurisdiction. You've really got to find your happy place. But I agree, if you're in the area, it makes it easier.
And not only that, there are some people that specialise inter-region or within the region. They pick out a particular segment, whether it be maidens or distance races or whatever it might be. So there's no exact way, Les, and I think you've just got to do what's best for you, or what you think is the most successful route for you to take. Matt has sent us a question here, John. Is using betting moves as part of a form selection bets process advisable? Look, using today's or historical betting moves probably needs to be viewed in context, stage of preparation, who the stable is, what the track's doing, what the expected pace likely to be, any perceived bias. They're the things that drive people's decisions towards certain horses most of the time. And look, if you use some sort of historical ratings-based system, then you should be able to sort of work out, assuming they're good quality, and you've got the analytical tools there, you should be able to work out why horses are backed. And that's the first thing I do, is particularly, horses that are resuming, I like to see first up support if I'm going to back the horse. And, when I make an assumption about a horse to get it to a certain price, that's all it is one assumption, and there could be many. And that could make a big difference between where I've marked it 3-1 or 6-1 or 8-1 or 10-1. So, understanding why the market's doing what it's doing, whether or not it's right doesn't really matter, but why it's doing what it's doing is a good insight and something that you need to view in context, I think.
Yeah, I think it nearly leads back to the last question. The more you know your area, and the more you know about everything that's going on, and the more information you have about, like you say, maybe jockey and trainer combinations, trainers first up, jockeys with intent from certain stables, certain things like that. In the country, I like to think I know as much as most people about the area, and can usually work out why things are drifting. And I'll still bet with confidence when things drift in areas where I'm happy that I think I know more than them. and try to take advantage of it. Whereas city meetings, I think, are far more scary. I think when horses blow in the city, I think it means a lot more in general. I think like more established market, the less volatile the market, the bigger and the drift means more. The volatile market of the country can be changed quickly by one or two people's opinion that are big players. And if you think you know more than them, I think you can take advantage of it. That's probably the best way I can describe it.
Good advice. Good advice. Paul has asked, how do you assess and rate horses when travelling interstate? E.g., why is Sydney form so strong in Melbourne or Queensland when there are smaller fields in Sydney? So two-part question. Is the Sydney form always stronger than Melbourne? Not always. I think it depends. And how do I assess or rate them? The ratings process takes care of all of that. So it doesn't matter if they're coming from Doomben to Randwick or Randwick to Flemington or Flemington to Morphettville. If you've got a good ratings process and it's robust and you understand what it's doing and why, then you can have the confidence that the figures will line up, and the market versus the price that you've got it will usually tell you whether or not you're on the right track in terms of being able to normalise those differences between the tracks and jurisdictions. That's important.
Yeah, I think you're far better set up to answer that question. I probably use your figures as a base, and then I'll go back and look at the horse's attributes. But it's I think it's like you say, the market and your rating is a good starting point.
Indeed. David asks an observation and a question for the Punters Academy show. Anecdotally, the market seems to have a poor read on the Waller stable this season. In contrast, the money for the Mar Eustace camp seems to be more accurate. How much, if any, credence do you guys give to betting patterns or a given stable? I would start off by saying I'm aware of it, but I don't factor it separately. I just try to keep it in the back of my mind. And I think that the best way for me to ignore it or just simply make the observation and sort of note to self is knowing that the trainer's rating that I apply will sort of largely take care of that process. Just to talk about your two stables that you mentioned, David, Waller minus 14.13% the last 180 days. That's a starting price, by the way, which is actually beating the market. And Waller favourites minus 7.24%. At SP, Mar Eustace minus 7.1 SP, and Mar Eustace favourites over the same 180-day period plus 5.87. So look, they are going really well in terms of the market favourite. But yeah, once again, I don't separate it as a factor and say I need to weigh this in some way. John?
Yeah, I don't trust moves for Waller horses because I don't really think I don't see them as a smart betting stable, if that makes sense. I don't really take much notice of moves for betting wise in their stable unless it's something strange, a first starter or something like that, or a horse that's out of character being backed. I might have a look at it, but I don't really take their betting moves seriously. Whereas you do get to know again in your area which stables, when money comes for horses, at what stage in the betting. Usually that's important. It means something, and then they run to that usually, and obviously Mar and Eustace are doing that. So I think it's important to keep track of those sorts of things more for intent and confidence from the stable to back up whatever your opinion may or might not be. So I think those things are important.
So it's probably a secondary factor more, so you could describe it as than a primary factor. And one thing about Waller is that if you see a runner that's well supported, followed by a late tactics announcement, they're worth keeping an eye on.
Especially when they've got multiple runners in the race, absolutely.
For sure. Okay, question from Matt. G'day, John. Love the new show. My question is about the track at Rosehill on Saturday. Early on appeared we would need to be forgiving of horses that race close to the fence. Then along came Best of Bordeaux in race 6, racing hard against the rail. How do we assess the performances overall in relation to track position? Are we less forgiving of horses that race close to the fence, or do we forgive those that race near the fence and mark Best of Bordeaux's performance higher? Well, I think we've covered that. Forgive
We
the
have.
fence.
I want to add one thing.
Yes.
When a horse has worked in the race and it goes back to the worst part of the track late in the race, and it's really expected to tire, or it should tire, and obviously the times supported they were slowing down in that race. I want to be really positive on that horse, because he's entitled, once he hits the quicksand, anything, you'll see horses when they trial or they're half fit and jockeys sit up on them, they stop quickly. And when a horse is really put to pressure and they should be under more pressure, the effect on them is greater. So I think in this instance, in isolation, I want to be really positive on Best of Bordeaux. Whether that works out for me or not in future, that's part of the long game, and that's part of. I don't think there's any ideal answer. Is the answer, but situations like this, you just have to make a decision whether something's beaten the pattern or there wasn't a pattern.
I think that's a very good bit of advice, John. Definitely for me, forgive the inside and elevate those horses racing close to the fence for sure. Daniel's asked, what's the most important thing for a beginner to nail down when doing the form, e.g. speed maps, sectionals, ratings, etc.? Well, from my point of view, Daniel, it's all about the ratings process. That's how I attack the form. It's not the only way to attack it. I learned via the Don Scott era. Get yourself, if you're interested in that side of it, get yourself a copy, or obtain a copy somehow of either the Winning Way or Winning More, which is just a revised edition. Some of the National Library's got one. You can buy them, but you're going to pay around $500 for a copy, $400 to $500, so they're expensive. And the other thing I'd probably think about doing is get yourself a good research tool and start looking at the factors that the market values or that are significant in terms of the outcome of races, and try to look at how the market is valuing each of those factors to work out what are the things that you can put together or assemble in short form that's going to give you an advantage against perhaps doing onerous amounts of form study. Becoming an expert on speed maps and sectionals and all those things, that can keep for a different day. It could be a simple thing like just starting off with favourites and looking at the top 2 or 3 in the market and trying to look for positive or negative factors on those horses and how they might be suited going into the race. It could just be something simple like that. Don't try and master it overnight. It is a lifelong learning curve, still learning, and you never stop if you're really keen. But that's my recommendation anyway. John, what about you?
Yeah, I'm similar. Like if you're talking out like dead set beginner and you want to nail things, learning how horses race going up in distance, which affects speed maps, things like that. Like you say, if you've got you've got a race where it looks like there's 2 or 3 chances, and one map's particularly better than the other, it is going to be factored into the price, but maybe not as much as it should be. And around certain tracks, I'd get to know the way tracks race and the way horses race first up, and then sort of build off it from there, because most things are built into the prices. It's so accurate these days, especially in the city. Getting an edge is quite difficult, and it is a long process, and it's tough for a beginner really. But I would say positioning run is probably number one, and trying to work out, if you can work out how a race is going to be run and where the horses are going to be. I think that's still underplayed, and there is an art form to it.
Okay, excellent. It is the time for the question of the week, and this week we've got a split decision going down to the wire. Dead heat between
two superstars of the game.
2 superstars of the game, indeed. Mark Cruikshank and Josh Reed. Mark has asked, question for the show: How do you do your jockey ratings? Personally, I think we fawn over them too much, and there's not much difference between the top ones, especially Hugh, J-Mac, Nash, etc. Do you do it via stats, algo performance versus SP, trainer combos, etc., and all number driven, or is there a subjective feel to it for bonusing and minusing jockeys race to race? barrier, distance driven, etc. Quite a few things in there, but interested how you do it. Obviously, they play a huge part, and once the gate opens, everything that you think can be out the window. And Josh has asked, when assessing the races and jockeys, what are some of the things you look for that others might not in regards to giving them or taking off weight based on performance? So Josh meaning, how you adjust the jockey's rating, either in a bonus or a negative sense. Look, both of those excellent questions. I think the jockey thing in particular is good because as a punter, if you haven't really sat down and thought too much about jockeys and the differences between them in a more accurate way, and the best way to do that is via a rating, I believe, then you probably are missing out on improving your form and your game overall. But look, to answer the question, for me, obviously I'm not going to describe too much of the detail, but it is an algorithmic process. So it's automated. In terms of some of the factors you mentioned, Mark, Bowman, McDonald and Nash right now, I have them identical in rating and they rate 0 for me, which means in theory a perfect jockey and no disadvantage or advantage. Everything else then rates below that naturally. Josh, the performances are measured across a wide range of variables to do with the actual expectation of the performance versus the actual performance. So it's not a simple SP calculation. You can't do it that way. There are flaws with that. We do look at the area that they ride in. We do look at the state that they ride in. We do look at things like their strike rate. So all of those factors, as I said, multifaceted, come into it. But it's not an opinion-driven thing. I don't ever think about it. It's just a number, and that number carries through. Post-race gets added to the rating. Pre-race gets taken off. So, for example, if you had a Bowman, a McDonald, a Nash this week riding a horse, well, then post-race, nothing would get added to the horse. If you had a 4-kilo claimer and they happened to be riding in town, for example, which they wouldn't be, but if they were, you might have a -7 or something, or should I say a 7, kilo or a 7-point jockey, and that would get added to the rating. So if you think of two horses that rate the same, and let's just pick a number, 100, the bad jockey would increase that rating to 107. The good jockey would keep the rating at 100. Next time they go round, if the bad jockey was riding the 107 horse, then it would have a -7 taken off it to bring it back to 100. And if the good jockey was still riding, it would stay at 100. So effectively, they'd rate the same. But if the good jockey goes on the ride that the 7-point jockey had, well, they'd effectively be getting like a 7-point bonus in that context. So that's how I do it. Other people do it different way. You don't have to add it on and take it off. You can just look at it as a measure and do it on the fly if you're comparing the difference. But yeah, there's obviously a big difference in jockeys, but not as much as some people might think. John, what do you say? I know that's a bit.
Oh, mate, this is it. This is racing for me. This is me in racing. This is. Funnily, I profile the race first, and then I profile how I want the horse to be ridden. Then I look at who's on it. So, like I'm talking perfect worlds. Like the best of the best of the best of riders for me ever is Nash from a wide draw on a horse that's going to control a race. And if I look up and, for argument's sake, Nash is on this horse, and then I'm not going to pick on the same person all the time, so I'll say jockey X, who may be someone who doesn't ride these sorts of horses with the same sort of confidence and maybe goes too slow on leaders or things like that. That horse could go from a max bet to me to not even betting. Like it's that big a difference. And I profile the horse and then how that rider is going to suit it on the day. So there are positions where a 4-kilo claimer can be okay, but it's you want to demand a lot more. No thinking, a horse that's really tractable, go to race in a positive position that they don't have to do a lot. Whereas others demand a rider that can get itself out of, or a little bit more of a confidence rider, or something to. They're going to have to add to that horse to get it home on the day. And there are only a few jockeys that can do that. There's there might be 6 in Sydney that can improve a horse really, whereas the others will win when it's supposed to win, or the race plans out nicely for it. So yeah, I think you're right that there's a huge edge in getting to know these things. And again, like jockey switches is huge as well, because it can not just signal an improved performance for the horse, but the intent of the stable. You know, like putting a 4 kilo kid on 3 times and then all of a sudden they put Bowman on. Well, you know, usually that means something. And everyone does it differently, but I honestly think it has to be underplayed, because there's no way that it can be done algorithmically perfectly if you're doing it the way I'm doing it, and saying that it's got that much effect over the horse and race. And I may go too far with it, but I have done it for a long time and do notice that, you know, it is a huge factor, and it goes right through from, you know, Randwick to Broken Hill.
Well, I think it depends how you do your pricing, but I will say this: when I say it's not material, it's obviously material. When I say that it's not as much as some people think, you hear comments on Twitter, this jockey's, you know, 10 links better than that one and 5 links better than that one.
Yeah, I agree, that's impossible.
Well, what I'm trying to say is this: that for every link differential, you double your price roughly. So $2 becomes
there you go.
3 links, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16. So you go from, you know, evens to 15 to 1 roughly, depending on what algorithm you might use for your pricing, if you think there's 3 links difference. So to say that there's 6 links or 10 links, you know, these are
and it's a game of inches. It's not a game of lengths, is it? Like you say, lengths are huge, you know, monstrous margins. So, the more in tune you are with it all, I think the better you can be. And it is to a point in country racing where there are jockeys that can't get horses home. Like, you're literally better off if you like a horse with that jockey, not just leave the race alone. So, you know, and there is no price for me in those situations. A lot of the time, it's pretty diabolical. So,
just on the going back to the algo side and the automation, and Mark was sort of particularly drilling down with this. Look, the manual work for me is managing the apprentice riders and the claims, and because they can change quite quickly depending on, you know, obviously the skill of the jockey. So that is a manual process that takes hours and hours each week. You know, if you sat down and once a month did it, you'd spend 8 or 10 hours on that process easily, checking through those figures to update them. So unfortunately, I can't get around that because there's no better way of doing it at this point in time. But look, great questions. I think jockeys are such a...
You missed one question. There's one little one where...
Oh, yes, there is. I've got one here from Barrels.
Barrels, the place punters.
Yes, I didn't... Hi, John and Paul. Do yourself bet the place only in any of your bets? Is there any value in betting purely win only? I'm getting a bit of echo here. What am I doing that for?
I blame you. I'll answer it. You've just muted yourself. I don't know whether you know it or not. But I do. When I like to bet place is when I'm really confident on the way a track's going to race and a position a horse is going to be in. So usually that'll be early betting, and I don't mind multing them in certain areas. So you say you've got a Tari with the rails out, and you've got a loose leader or a horse that's got maps behind leader with, you know, not too many variables in the race, and they're well set up on the day. The reason why I do it is because the jockeys are a bit frightening in these areas, and weird things do happen. And usually, if I find a race where something really strange has got to happen for a horse to miss a place, and I think the price is wrong and it's going to firm, I'll often use place betting as a sort of a backup, and place multi-betting is a bit of a backup to my days betting. I'm a bit strange compared to most people, a bit of an on-the-fly field person, so that's why I do it. But as a rule, I don't bet a lot for the place. It's usually that sort of situation where I do it.
For me, I do it very infrequently as well. It's usually when I can get for the place, the price that I assess at the win, which is very rare.
That's funnily, we've never had that conversation. I've never heard you say that, and I'm 100%. Sometimes you double check a race and you go, well, hang on, and I agree with you.
You know, you mark it 4 to 1 the win, and you can get 4 to 1 to place. It's very infrequent. But if that were to happen, then I still bet the same amount on the win that I would normally bet, and I increase the place component anywhere between 2 and 4 times, depending on field size and just how much of an edge I think I've got and just how confident I am in my assessment of that one runner versus the other runners in the field, and how confident I am with the assessment on those other runners. So if I think that I've marked, if I think that I've been kind to the other runners and maybe just a bit neutral on that runner in question, then that would give me the cause to be very confident and maybe have a 1/4 bet. If I wasn't confident, or there was a fair bit of question mark around it, then it might only be 1/1 or 1/1.5 or something. So I think it just depends on field size, the edges I think I've got, and the confidence I have in the prices for not only the horse in question, but the other runners in that race. That's my answer.
Don't leave me here. I'm going to throw. That's all the questions, right?
That is all the questions.
This is my pineapple of the week, mate. I'm going to do this every week. This is when I've copped it the worst, because everyone seems to love it when I'm in pain. And I'll tell you why this caused me pain. I got tipped this horse, so it's not serious pain when you find something yourself normally, but I played it in multis with 2 horses Friday night that both won at Canterbury into a horse at Dubbo that won midway through the day. And it was a bit of a Hail Mary play into a first starter of Toby Edmonds yesterday at Ipswich that I'd been passed on secondhand mail that they were very confident about. And I'll show you this lovely replay of this lovely first starter that I can't wait to go on and be a group horse and
John,
paying me for the rest of my life. So it's in the yellowy colours here, driven out. Not a lot happens in the run apart from it gets a bit keen. And then I hate this Ipswich track with a passion. Don't like it anymore after this. So it's still keen here. Big, strong filly having its first start. Don't know why he rides it into the bend. Then it gets shunted. This stage I was walking out of the room. I was hoping it did nothing. I was just hoping it had one bat and do nothing, and, well, whatever.
Bit green. What are you talking about? Every chance.
Now I'm on the canvas. Any other track in Australia he took it to, this big, strong filly would have gapped him. And only as the 4th and 5th leg of a multi could it hurt me like it did. But that was my pineapple for the week.
That's racing, indeed. Okay, this week, punters, we've got a preview show, Rapid Fire. Geez, it's going to be a bit involved this week, John. We've got a lot of racing down south, both in Sydney and Melbourne, which we'll be looking to cover. So tune in for that. That'll be on Thursday. We'll try and get through them a little bit quicker. We're still sort of fairly new to that format, so we're trying to punch it out and make it a bit more concise. And we'll endeavour to do that again. Thanks for listening this week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks again, Topsport, for their support in the show both shows actually, because they're now the sponsor of the Rapid Fire show as well. So see you next week, punters.
Thanks, guys.